What's going on, everyone? It's Spectre here, and today I wanted to bring you guys a discussion video to kind of talk about the future of the Pokemon franchise, since we're of course leading up to Pokemon Sword and Shield. As I'm sure you all know, a Pokemon Direct has been confirmed for June 5th at 6 a.m. Pacific, 9 a.m. Eastern, and Nintendo has stated that this Direct will feature a whole 15 minutes of brand new information about the upcoming Pokemon Sword and Shield games. Exciting stuff, and 15 minutes is a lot of brand new info, but the more I look into it, the more significant I think this Direct is. That's because I would argue this might very well be the most important 15 minutes ever for the Pokemon franchise as we know it. And that's a scary thing. Now, we all know the significance of the Pokemon Sword and Shield games. This is the first time that the series has ever gone to the home console, or at least the main series. It's perceived to kind of be a little rebirth of the franchise due to how unpopular, Gen 7, Sun Moon, Ultra Sun, Ultra Moon, and Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee were with Pokemon fans, and this is the first time that we've had a new generation start since 2016, etc. It's a big deal. But there's an even more important and pretty disturbing trend that we have to take note of if we're to understand the true magnitude of tomorrow's event and the release of Sword and Shield as a whole. So as far as I can tell, the trend that I'm talking about started in about 2016 with the release of Pokemon Go and has become more and more worrying ever since. Pokemon Go, having been developed by Niantic, of course became more popular than anyone could have imagined and brought the Pokemon Company insane revenue. For reference, in just 3 years, Pokemon Go has earned almost 5% of what the Pokemon Company has ever made in its 24 years of existence. Out of all the main series games, movies, toys, trading cards, etc., this one mobile game in 3 years accounts for 5% of the revenue the Pokemon Company has made in 24 years. That is massive. These sales are reflected in this revenue chart from the Pokemon Company that shows exactly what happened after Pokemon Go's release. Now, after Pokemon Go's release, I started noticing a little bit of a shift in attention from the Pokemon Company. Naturally, as a business, they're of course going to focus on what makes them the most money, and Pokemon Go has certainly been that thing for the past 3 years. Along with Pokemon Go came Pokemon Sun and Moon, which were of course in development at the same time as Pokemon Go. But then, in the main series, we next got Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon, which were good games in themselves, but given that Sun and Moon were already a thing, they felt very bland, with not a whole lot of stuff added for being one of those sort of third version or sequel games for Sun and Moon. And I think it's safe to say that most of the Pokemon fan base was relatively disappointed with them as a whole. Now, after this in the main series, we were expecting Diamond and Pearl remakes, as is pretty standard towards the end of every generation where, previous games are remade. However, we didn't get them. Instead, we got what Game Freak called new main series Pokemon games, Let's Go Pikachu and Let's Go Eevee. Now, this threw off the main series game's sort of structure and order hugely, since it remade Kanto for what is arguably the 6th time, if you count Yellow, Gold and Silver, Crystal, Fire Red and Leaf Green, and Heart Gold and Soul Silver. Due to the similarities with Pokemon Go, it's quite evident that the Pokemon Company kind of used this game as a method to try and encourage the massive population of Pokemon Go players to start playing on the Nintendo consoles as well. So, quite evidently, the Pokemon Company decided to insert Pokemon Go features and mechanics into a somewhat random game that completely changed the trajectory of the main series games in order to return to Kanto once more. Not only have the main series games been affected by this trend, but the console side series or spin-off games too, to the point where they've almost become extinct if you think about it. Think about this. The last Pokemon Stadium, Coliseum, XD, or Battle Revolution kind of game was in 2007, the last Ranger game was 2010, the last Mystery Dungeon game was 2015, the last Rumble game was 2015, and the only other console spin-off game since Pokemon Go's release in 2016 has been Pokken Tournament DX for the Switch, which is basically just a port of the previous Pokken game, and Pokemon Quest, which was of course also released for mobile. Aside from that, it's all been strictly mobile games. It seems that the success of Pokemon Go has caused the Pokemon Company to turn slightly away from both spin-offs and the main series to turn its focus towards more kind of risky mobile projects in the hope of having another sudden hit success like Go. The console spin-offs has been pretty much entirely cancelled from the looks of it, since the revenue just does not compare in the slightest to something like Go. The main series' flow has also been interrupted, and although they provide a consistent 15 million sales average for the first release, 7 million sales average for the third version or sequel games, and 13 million for remakes, this probably generates somewhere around 1.4 billion in main series game revenue every generation, which is usually about 4 years. Again, hardly anything compared to Pokemon Go, which has made about 4 billion in 3 years. Whereas Game Freak used to be the staple developer of Pokemon that was responsible for a huge amount of its income, it is now one of many subsidiary companies in a massive enterprise of other companies. And I think Game Freak recognizes this. Whereas they have created a few other small game projects in the past, this year marks the first year where we've heard they're actually working on the development of a massive, large-scale video game called Town, which you guys might have heard of. This is either a sign that Game Freak wants to expand their creative endeavors, or they recognize that at this point, it's too risky to put all their eggs in one basket, namely Pokemon. Although I've kind of been seeing this trend happen for a few years now, it all really hit home during the Pokemon Company's recent annual business conference at the end of May, where the company kind of previews what is to come in the next year to ensure that investors in the company know that things are going to be stable and profitable for them. Normally, you'd expect some big console spin-offs to be announced, if not some more info about the big hitting main series games. I mean, they're called the main series for a reason, since even just 4 years ago that would have been the main attraction for both investors and fans. But instead, we got Pokemon Home, which is great, don't get me wrong, Pokemon Go++, Pokemon Sleep, and Pokemon Masters for mobile. So you might be saying, okay, Soph, I get what you're saying, but what does all this mean? Well, it means that the Pokemon Company is no longer financially dependent on making deeper and more expansive story-driven games, which is worrying, since apps are much more simple to make and provide kind of instant and less meaningful kind of fun, with little story and depth compared to the main series games that Pokemon has historically been known for. This trend was actually kind of foreshadowed by Junichi Masuda back in 2014 when he was asked about the low difficulty of recent Pokemon games. He basically said that kids these days don't have the patience and attention span that they used to, and so games are becoming shorter, easier, and more about instant gratification. Now, this is not meant to sound kind of fatalistic about the Pokemon main series as a whole, it's just a very tense, nerve-wracking, and important situation. Since the main series is developed by Game Freak, we of course know that Game Freak themselves will want to do anything that they can to ensure that their games and their company's influence within the larger Pokemon company still stays. I think there are 3 major pieces of evidence that show Game Freak is desperately trying to cling on to relevance within the franchise. The introduction of Pokemon Home as a cloud-based phone service that allows players to essentially store their Pokemon anywhere from Pokemon Ruby and Sapphire all the way to Pokemon Sword and Shield, including Pokemon Bank and Let's Go. The introduction of Pokemon Let's Go in the first place, which, as I said, seems to be an attempt to pull the massive Pokemon Go players' population into the main series games by promising more Pokemon Go-like features and compatibility, which of course Nintendo must be very much in favor of since it brings them from the mobile games to the actual Nintendo consoles, and the fact that Game Freak has consistently been stressing that this is going to be a core RPG game that fans have come to know and love from the main series. But of course, they need to deliver now more than ever. So, with all that is at stake, and arguably the biggest and most hyped main series release of all time coming in just 4 or 5 months for the Nintendo Switch home console, 2 things need to happen. The Direct needs to convince players that they are dedicated to taking the time to create amazing main series games again, and us, the Pokemon fans, need to convince the Pokemon Company that we are still as interested in these high-quality main series games as we are the instant gratification mobile games, if not more. I firmly believe that the fate of the main series and Game Freak's influence in the Pokemon Company depends on the content of this Direct and the fans' response to what's in store for us for Sword and Shield. Anyway guys, I hope you enjoyed this quick discussion video. If you did, be sure to leave a like and subscribe with notifications on for more Pokemon content. Be sure to also let me know what you think is going to happen in the Direct and to the Pokemon franchise in the future. Will the main series die? This has been Soul Spectre, and I'll see you guys next time for another Pokemon video.